Hello, Bronx and Queens. My name is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and I am running to be your next Congresswoman on June 26th in our Democratic primary election.
Hi, I'm a semi-attractive ethnic minority woman who clearly knows nothing about basic economics. But vote for me anyways. It's too bad you're not a smoking hot ethnic minority woman, because you've got nothing else going for you, sweetheart. Hello everyone, this is My Two Cents. You've probably heard about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez making the rounds as the future of the Democratic Party. She may be younger and better looking than Bernie, but when it comes to public policy, she's just as determined to drive the economy into the ground with socialist policies that have already been demonstrated not to work. I could rant more, but let's just get into it.
I wanted to take a quick minute and talk about 5 issues that our campaign is talking about and the 5 changes that we want to make. 1, a federal jobs guarantee. A federal jobs guarantee will establish a public option for employment so that no person who is looking for a job has to go without one. This public option for employment will also establish a $15 minimum wage pegged to inflation, as well as paid health care on the job and paid family and sick leave. So no family has to risk unemployment because they're taking care of a sick one or because they just had a child.
Well, golly, a federal jobs guarantee. No one will have to worry about whether or not they can get a job because the federal government will have a legal obligation to employ the unemployed, whether they're skilled or unskilled, hard workers, or lazy pieces of crap. But tell me, Miss Ocamio, exactly what kind of jobs are you going to provide? Are you expecting people to dig holes and then fill them back in and get paid $15 an hour to do it?
Hello! How are you? How's the folks? What's new?
The thing about jobs is that they're only worthwhile if they're actually adding value to other people's lives. This is why in a free market, people choose to give their money to other people in exchange for a good or service. Those people who are working jobs that aren't adding value to other people's lives don't have any customers and therefore inevitably seek work elsewhere until such time as they find a job where they are adding value. This ensures that scarce resources are only being put towards those endeavors that actually improve people's lives. However, since federal jobs are paid with stolen tax money, citizens can no longer communicate whether or not the service adds value by voting with their wallet, and it guarantees that resources will be used for inefficient and unhelpful causes. Think about it. How many times have you gone to the DMV, City Hall, the post office, or some other government service and seen people sitting at their desks playing games on their smartphones instead of providing customer service? Such a thing would get you laid off at any private business, but firing federal workers is virtually impossible.
It's grounds for dismissal if anyone ever got fired here, but they don't.
The state inevitably ends up paying 2 or more people to do a job that could be accomplished by one person, since their revenue is guaranteed by taxes and there is no incentive to spend money efficiently. Further, many businesses, especially small businesses, will lose employees to these inefficient federal jobs since the small businesses aren't paying $15 an hour minimum wage with full benefits. But why aren't they doing this? It's because they can't afford to. It's an inefficient waste of resources. However, someone has to foot the bill for the salary and benefits of those guaranteed federal jobs. And as private businesses are closing due to losing employees to the public sector, there will be fewer sources of private revenue to tax. The state is already spending far more than it takes in. What's your solution to this, Miss Ocamio?
2, improved and expanded Medicare for all. Improving Medicare for all, lowering copays, and expanding the system so that every American has the opportunity to buy into Medicare will improve our healthcare system for the entire country. Improved and expanded Medicare for all additionally will allow every single person to be covered by mental health care, dental health care, as well as physical health care without having to pay outrageous copays for medication and the regular checkups that they need.
And you realize this isn't free either, right? Medications cost money. Medical facilities cost money. Doctors, nurses, and other labor costs money. If we had a medical industry under free market conditions, the distribution of these resources would be governed by rising and falling prices due to supply and demand, ensuring the most efficient use of resources. However, when you nationalize healthcare and remove price indicators, you'll learn what every other country with a single-payer healthcare system has learned. There are drastic shortages in one part of the country, drastic surpluses in another, and by the time political bureaucrats figure it out, the needs in those parts of the country have already changed and so can't be fixed. Plus, as we've seen in the UK, Canada, and other European nations, as more and more money is needed to pay for the inefficient healthcare industry, costs inevitably need to get cut, and so some patients are simply denied service or are actively euthanized to cut those costs.
3. Tuition-free public college and trade school. As our economy develops, we always increase our educational opportunities to match. Tuition-free public college and trade school will ensure that no child refuses to get an education because they don't believe that their family can afford it. By allowing these opportunities to be accessible to all Americans, we can educate ourselves as we see fit, and we can continue to be the most innovative country in the world. But in order to do that, we have to remove the economic barriers to an education. And by removing economic barriers to an education, we become a more just nation, a more economically productive nation, and we also continue to be the leader in science and technology, as well as literature and the arts.
American student performance compared to students in other nations is already mediocre at best, despite the US spending far more on public education. But putting that aside for a moment, let's just consider in principle what Ms. Ocasio wants to do with education, particularly post-secondary education. Education is a service, like anything else purchased in the market. When left to the free market, education costs are determined by supply and demand, which guarantees that only hardworking students will receive the highest quality education at the lowest possible price. However, when the government provides education for free by forcing the taxpayers to subsidize education, far more people seek out college education than otherwise would. After all, do you care as much about working hard and passing your courses if someone else is paying for them? Why not give it a try? You now have nothing to lose. Further, the faculty have no incentive to care about whether or not their students succeed, since they know the students don't pay them. They're guaranteed their income no matter what quality of education is provided. It's no surprise then that enrollment rates in countries where education is free actually end up being lower than in countries with education that is more privatized, and that the percentage of adults with college degrees is lower in countries with so-called free education. Goodness, Ms. Ocasio, have you done any research about your proposed policies?
4. 100% renewable energy by 2035. Our nation and our world are in a climate crisis, but we have the opportunity to turn the ship around. But we can only do it if we come together and embark upon an ambitious legislation known as the Green New Deal. The fact of the matter is, fossil fuels cannot last forever, and we must transition to solar and wind technologies and more if we are going to leave a healthy planet for our children and our grandchildren to live and enjoy.
Okay. I'm going to assume, for the sake of argument, that global warming is absolutely a thing. Global warming is happening. It's dangerous, and it's 100% the fault of mankind. Assuming this is true, and it's highly questionable to say the least, what then is the best solution? Giving the government central planning control to force people to spend their money on inefficient energy sources like wind and tidal power? Or allow the free market to develop solutions through the natural process of supply and demand? As author Ryan McMacken notes, such a position is similar to that of a person who, upon seeing that winter is approaching, demands that everyone build the winter shelter his way immediately. "Can't you people see it's getting colder?" he says. "If we don't build the shelter my way, we'll all freeze." When faced with questions of whether or not his shelter plan is really the best way to proceed, or if a different type of shelter might be more cost-effective, or if others would rather build their own shelter, he angrily declares, "You winter deniers don't care if we all die!" Naturally, if the group then goes ahead with their belligerent companion shelter plan, they may find in the end that the shelter fails to keep out the cold or is structurally unsound. In that case, the group is actually much worse off because it expended large amounts of valuable resources that should have been applied elsewhere. Even if global warming really is a problem, Ms. Ocasio better be prepared to explain what her plan will cost and that it is cheaper than alternative plans, as well as the proof that it will actually work. Assuming that the answer to all these questions is affirmative, government intervention won't be necessary. The free market will accomplish it on its own. Like every other industry, whenever the government steps in and tries to force a one-size-fits-all solution on a problem, it guarantees that resources will be spent inefficiently, causing decline in other industries where those resources really were needed, and quite possibly creating even worse problems than the ones the government set out to solve.
5. Broad-based immigration reform and the abolition of ICE. ICE was just established in 2003 in the same suite of legislation as the Patriot Act and the Iraq War. And ever since the establishment of that legislation, American civil rights have eroded over the last 14 years. In order for us to feel safer in our streets, our churches, our schools, and our homes, we must abolish ICE.
Yeah, what you mean is, I know I'll never get elected unless I flood the environment with unskilled immigrants who will vote for the expansion of government like I want. So let's remove all the barriers that stop them from getting in. You may be surprised to find out, Ms. Ocasio, that I would also support abolishing ICE, but only once we first abolish all forms of welfare and the democratic elections process. If a man from Mexico wants to move to New York to start a business and improve the lives of the local citizens, I couldn't care less. But if immigrants intend to steal my money by voting for politicians like you, well, then I have a thing or two to say about that.
This is the legislation that we need, and this is the legislation that is going to move us forward as a country. But we can't pass any of it until we get money out of politics. And that is why I am proud to not take any money from special interest lobbyists or corporations so that we can get things done and have a prosperous future for America.
Well, if you're the first politician ever to make this kind of promise about not taking money from special interest groups, and you stick to it, good for you. But I'm not holding my breath. In fact, I don't think there's anything wrong with people or corporations voting with their wallets by choosing to donate or not donate to something of their own free will. However, when the thing they're giving money to is a politician who will use their authority to initiate force against peaceful people, steal their money, and then spend it on things those people never agreed to, I think there is a problem. Regardless of where your funding comes from, you're still a statist who wants to use force against peaceful people to achieve your desired ends. And this makes you no more morally superior than any other politician. Before we end, I'd like to note that nowhere in this video did Ms. Ocasio say how she plans to pay for all these very expensive endeavors. And when asked, she really hasn't said anything more specific than, the rich and corporations need to pay their fair share. We'll institute a carbon tax and cut military spending and all other sorts of nondescript policies that basically amount to, we'll raise taxes and then we'll have the money to pay.
If people pay their fair share, if corporations and the ultra-wealthy, for example, as Warren Buffett likes to say, if he paid as much as his secretary paid, if we reversed the tax bill but raised our corporate tax rate to 28%, which is not even as high as it was before, right. If we do those two things and also close some of those loopholes, that's $2 trillion right there. If we implement a carbon tax, that's an additional amount of a large amount of revenue that we can have. Just last year, we gave the military a $700 billion budget increase, which they didn't even ask for. What we need to do is reprioritize what we want to accomplish as a nation.
The thing is, Ms. Ocasio, you would do well to consider Hauser's Law. Named after Stanford University professor Kurt Hauser, this law refers to the fact that history shows that no matter what the tax rates are, the government has never successfully collected more than about 20% of the national GDP. In other words, tax revenue tops off at a certain point. Once taxes become sufficiently high, many businesses and higher income individuals will simply stop being as productive, or work aggressively to find tax shelters and loopholes to protect their hard-earned money. As a result, the government will actually start taking in less money once tax rates are high enough. That being said, the GDP in 2016 was not quite $19 trillion. But let's round up anyways. That means that at best, the US can hope to take in $3.8 trillion in taxes, assuming optimal conditions. According to a recent study by the Mercatus Center that not even left-wing outlets like Vox has denied, Medicare for all would cost approximately $32 trillion over 10 years, or $3.2 trillion per year. So even assuming optimal tax rates, Ms. Ocasio would have to spend 84% of total tax revenue just to fund one of her many proposed endeavors. Don't forget that the government already has unfunded obligations to Social Security, other welfare programs, and that deficit spending has brought the national debt to more than $21 trillion. So I'd like to know, Ms. Ocasio, how exactly are you going to pay for all this, and who is going to pay for all this? You might be an unmarried woman who's wasted your best years fighting for political causes that have been soundly debunked for decades, but it's still not too late to learn how the world really works. And that is my 2 cents. Take it for what it's worth. Thanks everyone for watching. If you liked this video, please hit like and subscribe. You can also hit the bell to ensure you're notified every time I upload a new video. This video was made possible by my patrons. If anyone else would like to donate and help ensure that I have the time and resources to keep putting out content, for just $1 a month on Patreon or Maker Support, you'll have your name listed in the end credits of every video and the link to one of your social media platforms listed in the description. You can also support the channel by purchasing my 2 cents merchandise on Teespring. You can also follow me on Twitter, Minds.com, BitChute, WordPress, Gab, and iTunes. Uploads are every Thursday and Saturday, so stay tuned for more videos.